Mr. Rotenberg, and then we'll have his presentation.
So my name is Charles Rotenberg. I was born in this city. My great-grandfather came here from Poland, Germany, Poland, Austria at the time. My lineage found its way through New York City. So my grandfather was actually born in New York City, came to Toronto as a 3-year-old. And his father, who I was named after, owned movie theaters in this city. One at Queen and Spadina, where there's a McDonald's now, it was called the Pickford, named after Mary Pickford, which was a big star at that time in the silent era of film. Many Torontonians go to Hollywood and make themselves famous, but there are hardly any films made in Toronto. This actor did make a film in Toronto called Owning Mahoney, about a true story of CIBC bank fraud, and he gambled $10 million of the CIBC's money in Atlantic City, and he was so believable, not just as an actor, but as a Torontonian, as a banker, as a, that I've always related to this actor and actors like him. He's a bit Brando-esque. The actors that I watched as a kid, James Cagney, that when I was a little boy, because my grandfather had theaters, we had free access to movies. And in those days, there was a movie theater in every single neighborhood. And in those days, there were 6 boroughs in Toronto. It was separated into 6 sections: East York, Leaside, Borough of York. And each borough had its own downtown. We didn't come down to Yonge Street. Once in a while, we came, Christmas time, we'd come downtown. And we're talking about Bathurst and Eglinton was called the Village of Northtown, because it was North Town. That was as far as it went back in the 50s or 60s. And 5 of those 6 boroughs were working class. Now those 6 boroughs, which are all amalgamated, there's only one left that's working class, and that's Etobicoke. So it's all professional class, and it's all being sort of scrubbed and cleaned over. But back then, there was real, not quite like this, because this is very American. And that's sort of why I chose the film, because I thought that many of you really had never seen a slice of America, because this is very real. And God's Pocket is an actual neighborhood in Philadelphia, but it's actually called Devil's Pocket. But all cities have them, and you don't have to drive too far to find them. And they always have these corner bars, and people drink. They close it, even in Buffalo, they close at 4:30 in the morning. They open up at 10 o'clock in the morning. There's an absurdity to the life, but they belong in that frame. It's when you walk in, you're obviously an outsider. And sometimes it could be a cop bar, or it could be a mobbed up bar. And so you have to be careful. As a kid, you wander into these places, and you're struck by something right away. So I thought that I wanted to show you this film because it's not his best film, it's his last film. He did a film called A Most Wanted Man the same year, which was an excellent film. As a John Kerry novel or something. It was very good. John LeClaire, very good film. But this film, I thought most of you would not have seen. And I apologize for the brutality and also the writing was a little bit, it was funny, but again, the writer is different than the director. The director is a first-time director. He's the guy that plays Roger on Mad Men, and the actress, she's also on Mad Men. She's the TV series Mad Men, and. The other guy, Richard Jenkins, he was the writer. He's also a very good part-time actor that very few people know about. So I thought this would give you I thought it would offend you, perhaps, but it would also give you, in terms of, can you really change? Like, these people are stuck where they are. They like it or not. Now, in the character that Hoffman plays, he can leave anytime. So then the question is, once he's down in Florida, what's going to happen to him? Can he really reinvent himself? And they say to him in the film, you're lucky, you can get out of here. And I wonder sometimes, also, you may not have noticed, but there was a song at the end, not right at the end, in the soundtrack called Trying to Find My Way Home, or something like that. I think it's, yeah, and really that's sort of that same, now I don't know how it ties into existentialism, because is behavior determined at birth? Is it determined by the culture we're from? Is it determined by the neighborhood? Or is it something that we react to? Or is it, you know, as I'm a math teacher, a science teacher, is it genetic? Is it really coded into us, this violence? I believe it is, actually. I believe that from a biological point of view, we're at war 24/7. We're always at war. I don't think our species could ascend to higher, I think that violence will always be there. So even if we, and then in terms of our behavior, there's a certain point in our lives where we lose ourselves to something else. You know, because of expectations, or you become something. Like in Toronto, everything after the 1970s became glitzy and professional. Like people were wearing Hugo Boss, they were wearing hockey sweaters before. You know, they were wearing, now all of a sudden they were wearing Versace. And I could never come to terms with that. So I've always been out of step. So when I see something that's real, it does resonate. And that's, I think, what I heard from a lot of people who talk about the film. It resonated. And because there is, and especially his acting, like there's a scene in there with Smiling Jack where he gets violent with him in the funeral home, but he doesn't hit him, he slaps him. And I don't think that was written into the script. I think that's reactionary on his part. And that guy who played Smiling Jack, he was kind of a freak too. He was in that same scene, he was petting the dead woman, where he was having a drink and he was stroking her. And I mean, so the question, there's a lot of hidden things in this film. Now, personally for me, I love all film. I could never ever be a critic, because there's very, very few films that I don't like. And I mean, I've seen thousands of films in my lifetime. And I've seen maybe the greatest era of filmmaking, which was the 70s and 80s, in terms of epic stories. So, you know, when I see films like this, I'm glad that I'm still living in a free society where expression can be not stifled, but a film has to be picked up by a distributor. And, you know, there's only one theater chain now, and back when I was growing up, there were several chains. So the films like this were everywhere. So that's why I chose to film. Also because the actor, I thought he was a great actor. Most people found out about him when he played Truman Capote, and he got an Oscar for that. But that sent him off the deep end. He lost himself after that. A similar situation happened to Robert Downey Jr. when he played Charlie Chaplin. Now he came back from the abyss, but he only does Iron Man now. You'll never see him do anything meaningful. And of course he makes $1 billion, but he's, you know, if I've met actors. I lived in California for 7 years. I taught their kids. So I taught at some high-end schools. I also taught at the worst possible neighborhoods in California, LAUSD schools. So I've had a wide variety of experience. And Warren Beatty, for instance, his daughter was one of my students. So when I met Warren Beatty, I thought, wow, this is cool, man, because, you know, I'm not the kind of guy who, you know, goes crazy about that sort of thing. There's only a couple actors I would really like to meet, like Harvey Keitel. I'd like to meet him because I think he's cool. But Warren Beatty, and I met his wife, Annette Bening, and she was a B with a capital B, with a really big bolded capital B. Warren was okay. He was cool. He was a very intelligent guy, but he's in love with himself, and he had no face. Like, he's Hollywood. I met John Turturro once in Toronto at 3:30 in the morning on Dupont and Spadina. I was in that grocery store, and I said hello to him because very few people knew who he was. And he's really shy and thank you very much. You know, like, he really wasn't who his screen characters portray. I think actors, in terms of existentialism, all actors are existentialists, or they're not, or they can't be. Okay, they can never be. It's one or the other, I think. because they have to live in somebody else's frame. Peter Sellers was another great actor that went off the deep end. When he did roles, he was in that state all the time, even for his children. He was in character. And so these guys were, I think what happens is when you go down that road, you lose your soul, you lose a piece of your soul. And all of the actors I've met, they all have this aura about them, like almost like electromagnetic, waves that come very strong, and yet they know you're looking at them. Like I can understand how it must be a very conflicting life for them. Very few actors could maintain a normal life, and unfortunately, Philip Seymour Hoffman, a lot like many actors like him, fell to his addictions, and he had to lose himself in heroin because he couldn't sustain who he was. Like he'd lost himself somewhere in the process. So it's, when I couldn't see his last films for about maybe 6 months or something after his death. I couldn't watch a film with him in it. And but one great thing about a film is when you leave the film, and unfortunately not many people see films in theaters anymore, but when you leave the film, you don't know where you are. You're actually in a state of some other dimension or some other state. I'd come out of the Young and Bluer Theater, the Uptown, which was my favorite theater, and I'd come out and I'd be Young and Bluer, but I wouldn't know where I was, especially after seeing a Brando film or a Nicholson film or all of these method actors, Pacino, in the 70s and 80s. And that's how I know whether a film is good. Now, I never read a critic's review before a film. Never. I won't touch it. So I want to go in not knowing anything. Now, of course I have expectations because I have the director and that sort of thing. So I always look forward to certain directors. My favorite director would be Stanley Kubrick. So watch anything by him. And I would, I feel like I owe you a good film. Because this is not a great film, but it's a real film. And I thought for sure many of you had never seen America the way I had seen it, but believe me, these neighborhoods, that was authentic. That's authentic Philadelphia. That's as authentic as it gets. And in fact, it could be Tonawanda, it could be Cleveland, it could be Boston, anywhere where there's working class. And all of that's been smoothed over by corporatism. It's all disappeared. It's all shiny lights now. And Jamba Juice. There's no, it's all corporate. It's pizza, and Jamba Juice. It's all bland, homogenous. If you want to be if you're a kid growing up in Toronto, you know what I would do? I'd hang out in the alleyways of Queen Street, in the garages that are all painted. I'd hang out places like Leslieville, neighborhoods that still have authenticity. Like sort of Trinity Bellwoods would be another example. But it's hard for people who are coming to this country, you end up in Thornhill, and it's like, to me, that I'd rather be in God's pocket. I shouldn't say anything bad about Thornhill, but you don't see kids on the street. Like they're all in their houses. So, and films like this generally don't get watched. And they're disappearing. It's a rare breed. So that's why I thought I don't know if I can use the word treat you to the experience, but because it is a crude film. So I apologize for that. I would rather show you a film like Barry Lyndon, Stanley Kubrick, but I'm sure many of you have seen it. Because you can